All right, Thomas. What lovely form you have brought into this score. Just I love the resonance between the front end and the back end here. Of some instruments returning to play solos, some contexts, and everything else. I'm just going to make a quick comment here about the layout of the pages. You don't have to reduce so much to like minimal instruments on so many times. I think you could just leave like wind, strings, and brass more or less the way that they are throughout the entire piece, and then just then remove or put back in percussion and other instruments as you see fit. Like we have a similar problem. Just jumping back here, excuse me, a little too far. At the beginning, right? The first page of a score should always just have all the information you have here in the instrumentation page. Go check out my video, what orchestra librarians want you to know. The one about instrument names, that also talks about the layout of the first page. It always include all of this information that you've got here. But see, like, you can remove harp and all of and any superfluous percussion instruments, but try to leave this in your score. And I would say in general, if you have got a if you've got a piece that's going to have minimal rehearsal time and possibly only be performed once in its entire history, then just leave like all of the information on the page if you can, without making the staff size too small, and then like I was saying before, just take out unnecessary percussion instruments and harp and so on as needed. All right, because this as a first page is just really kind of skimpy. It doesn't, like, I'm just, anybody looking at this would say, wow, okay, that's cool. It's like a, for winds and horns and some harp, and then next page, oh, oops, right. Do you know what I mean? So just really try to make the information not quite so small, unless like if this were a published audition, a published edition with landscape, excuse me, not landscape, but portrait orientation, where you might actually have two systems, this broken up into two systems on one page or something, then yeah, I'll grant you that. But in this particular kind of exercise, it's not necessary to do that. Also, what I'm not showing here on the screen, because I've zoomed in so far, is the fact that the layout for these pages is like not the same as the layout for the stave. So if you can figure out a way of setting your page size to, I think it was like 747 wide by 420 high. I think that would and then just have the this fit that page. Then it saves me some hassle too, and it just makes the resolution of the images a lot better. All right, so I've jumped back to E, and it's we're just going to work our way backwards. Okay, Thomas, I haven't seen your comments or presence in the community very much, so I don't know if you're following along on these evaluations. But I'm for these last few dozen full length evaluations, I'm starting at the end and then working my way back, just because I've already evaluated so many entries with that start at the beginning and then look over B and then C and so on. So now let's go backwards so that you get the best of me, the freshest part of my evaluation on the newest stuff, at least proportional to all of the entries that have gone by so far. So just a little observation, it's kind of hard to talk about what happens here at E without looking at a bar or so before. And I'm noticing here that you have a inconsistency in the way that everything is articulated here. So you have your trumpets going, ba 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 ba. So like they're playing each thing, but they aren't accented. Here you have your reeds playing, but they are accented. And here you have your strings going slur ba bum. I think that they should all have accents and there shouldn't be any slurs, right? I think there should be, even accents you might think, oh, well, that'll make the trumpets too loud. Don't worry about it. Have everybody play with the same amount of force, all right? And as far as I'm concerned, you could have had a lot more weight on this. You could have brought in the second violins, you could have brought in the cellos, you could have had more of these instruments playing. Like the bassoons are about to do this do 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 do, so they could go ba 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 da 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 da. Do you know what I mean? And horns, could they have helped out, or trombones or something? Just something to make it just more weighty. Yeah, because it just feels a little weak. All right, but I still like the way that the following bar turns out. So that leads us to this next section, and I really appreciate how you have given everybody a destination dynamic in your fade out, fading down to triple P by the end. Okay, that's exactly right, exactly what needs to happen there, because you want this, this to the tremolo here on your first violins to continue on over the your little bassoon solos here, bassoon family solos. Interesting that you don't have you do not have octaves here, but they're not necessary. I think I went for a tremolo as well, because like it creates tension, like, so there's tension behind the solitude, right, rather than just a single note. And it also gives ample space in the sound picture for these grumbly instruments. So it's a little strange though, like soft mezzo forte, right? So I'm wondering if this could have gone crescendo, right? So at least so that when the first bassoon picks up the game right in here, it feels more like it is that it's just that it isn't just coming in stronger in a jolting way. Yeah. All right. So now we get into the scoring of the real the epilogue really does start now, right? Adding the octave and then going to the melody. That's really beautiful, right? And then here you drop the bassoon out so that the oboe can just continue on by itself. No critique here. I think that's fine. It's a decision that you decided to make. That works for me. I like how you have tremolo at the beginning and then just normal strings after that. You're saying dolce, right? You know who needs to be dolce is this person right here. These folks here do not need to be dolce. They need to be in the background, right? And there you're running into a slight problem here, because in the score, the whole purpose of the harmony lower down, a C third, and then right here you're playing you've got a full E minor chord right in here. The whole purpose of that was because it sort of encased this right in here, but like when you come back with this bare melody right in here, it's a little more problematic, right? So since without the enclosing octaves right in here with your melody, then this this has the potential of interfering with the line. But the the oboe is so pungent here that it isn't really an issue, but it could have been if you'd used an instrument that wasn't so strong. But I mean, so long as the strings stay in the background and the oboe stays in the foreground, it's not an issue. But yeah, but dolce, you're just saying, look, I want everybody to have lots of vibrato and stuff, and to be very sweet and emotional. That's not their role. Their role is to be in the background. It's the role of the oboe to be dolce, right? That's where it belongs, and you should, maybe put a little bit, give the bassoon a little love here too. All right. I'm really glad that you dispensed with the tenuto marks. instead of just exporting them into your score, you turn these into really lovely little slurs, and I think that works way, way better. All right, and I thought that this was really nicely done. Da 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 dum, and then bass clarinet coming in. It's a little less clear, like the handoff to here, and it doesn't, like, since these two timbres don't really, like, they're not really copacetic. They don't really merge very well. Like, I see what you're trying to do here, trying to do a merge from the bassoon part into the bass clarinet part. But what if you just started bass clarinet here? Then you don't have to worry about all this foo-farawing around down here, right? So just da da da, just both of them, and then bass clarinet all by itself, ba ba bum. And I thought this was really nicely done, da da, along with the cello, right? So the implied leap here, yeah, just really, really gorgeously done. And then introducing once again that tension of the tremolo right in here. And and here's like where I totally approve of tied unmeasured tremolo. It just really does help the player to just really see, like, okay, the full duration of this tremolo is to there, and then I do it again on the same note, right? But it's like, it really just feels like there might be the tendency of the player to actually add a tiny bit of articulation to the beginning of this, because seeing it as a separate note from what happened before, and then down a half step, down a half step, and so on. So here you've got this glissando. There's going to be a little bit, anyways, shifting from a sharp pitch from a sharp to a natural on the same pitch. But write it in. Glissando, portamento perhaps is like, depends. Like glissando, I might interpret more as da, whereas portamento I might interpret as da. Do you know what I mean? Just like the easing into portamento, more easing into the next place. It's sort of like it's repositioning the finger, right, to the next note. Whereas glissando is kind of, I almost feel, is more the connotation of glissando across the duration of the entire pitch, but not always, right? So glissando and portamento essentially really mean the same thing, but maybe just putting in a straight line is enough here, and I think that would communicate what you want there. Yeah, so just all strings in here. The positioning is good. The scoring is good. It all works for me. And then coming in here with a flute solo, just really so Village. It just really sounds great. And you've got the first violins in the background. I would mark this pianissimo sempre here, and I would actually come back in here and remark. I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, but mark pianissimo sempre through this again, right? Just to make sure that they don't outplay your solo flute right in here. Yeah. And I would also mark the solo flute semplice here. So, you get a little bit of vibrato, but it's not too much. It's just keeping it really simple and direct and sweet and, kind of innocent. And then the trade off to bassoon. I've seen this in a couple of other evaluations recently. I think that that's an absolutely beautiful, unlikely, but very workable, especially in the tenor register, lower notes here. It works great. Not so sure about having like a break here. I think that this could all be one bow and match the slurring pattern of the bassoons. I would prefer that, or put the slur here, right, and then one, and the, just basically do down and up slurs, down, like just break the bar in half. I think that goes along with what happened before a lot better. I mean, I see how you're trying to set this up. Da, da. Have you considered something to make this like more seamless? You could have your double basses slur down from this D. So like play the D unison with the cellos and then slur down to the G. And it just almost sounds like the cellos are slurring down to the D. Or sorry, down to the G, I meant to say. Yeah. But I mean, lovely idea to end with the bassoon and the, excuse me, not bassoon, the bass clarinet and the cellos. Really lovely idea. And now let's go back and take a look at the section from D forward to E. And I just want to make one comment about an overall approach, which is, both working well and also a danger to you. All right? And that is that I feel that your treatment of the of the octaves and so on, like pizzicato here, and just I feel it's very, very strong. The way you have worked out the figuration and the snare drum in here and so on. I think that all works great, and I think that by the time you get to here, it's starting to sort of work like clockwork. And the big problem here is that I feel you're not pushing the tempo enough, right? I think when you get to here, it says tempo in the score. You kind of didn't mark any tempo change here or anything, but yeah, it says tempo. But I think that if you're going to take this approach, notch it up a little bit, notch it way faster than this, and then when you get to right here, it should be even, yet even faster, because I feel that if the sort of the yep beep boop beep boop beep boop kind of, and then when it gets into here, it just really becomes all the way through, and so I think it just becomes too matter of fact rather than being fiery or just incandescent, or do you know what I mean? I mean, I would rather hear this part right in here, just people going nuts, right? So I think that and you can work in accelerandos over several bars. They don't have to just suddenly jump to the next tempo. Just one last little comment here, and that is when you're dealing with compound time, make your tempo markings dotted, okay? Right, because it just it almost makes no sense. How could the player, a player or conductor might look at this and say, oh yeah, he forgot the dot, and then conducted it, dotted rhythm equals 124, right? How are they supposed to calculate by the quarter note when the beat of the baton is on each dotted quarter note? Okay, so just watch out for stuff like that. All right, so let's go back to the beginning of D. All right, so I led with the whole idea of the of the staccato, the quality of the cascading octaves, and so on and so forth. So let's take a look at it. So here we have pizzicato. And I think that just with respect to everybody who uses them all the time, I feel that the LV tie here is a bit of a crutch. Just write in how long you want this to last. If you want it to last a dotted, if you want this tied to another dotted quarter note, and that's how long you want it to last, that's how long it lasts. Okay, just tell the player how long you want it to be. If you're going to stick a dotted half note in the middle of a bar of 12/8, it's fine with me. Then do that here too, right? Just say pizzicato, dotted half note, piano sostenuto, right? SOS period, so that they realize, oh yeah, okay, well the sostenuto marking is telling me that he hasn't accidentally put pizzicato here when if maybe he intended arco because it's a longer note, right? So, but just write in the how long you think it's going to last, right? And then certainly the timpani works really great with the pizzicato here, and so there's kind of just really no need for the LV tie here at all. But I like how you're scoring it to be sort of anticipatory, right, rather than separate, right? So it just really is it's almost like clockwork, right? It is anticipating the boop 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 kind of stuff happening in the staccato bassoons here. Okay, so that's great. Glockenspiel, with the pizzicato and the pizzicato descending. Um, Possibly, what I would say here is that like you might need a little bit more support from somebody in the woodwind section here, just playing staccato alongside this, because I don't feel that it. You know, you're taking pains to keep this like not too loud, but this push here by the French horns, which is gorgeous by the way, you know, like, and then we get a fuller sound right in here. At that point, you know, even though you're bringing in the trombones and so on to bulk up the bassoons, what about my cascading octaves in here, right? What happened to them? You're saying, okay, well, I'll go to arco here and so on, but that's still, I still feel you need some more support there. So if you got a free clarinetist or something, or you know, if you can throw in somebody else helping just for a little bit, you know, even if it's just a little touch of flute, just playing staccato right here, not the lower one, but the upper one, right? I mean, just some kind of, you know, just a little bit of doubling on this, because glockenspiel isn't enough. Okay. All right. So just looking at the all the other elements, or just one more little thing, the col legno here. So here you're saying triple P, then you don't give a dynamic for the col legno. So you know you're just saying, oh well, triple P on the col legno. So that just really, the col legno is not going to contribute anything at that dynamic. However, it isn't a very loud effect anyway. So you know, better for you to mark a louder dynamic on the col legno, so that like at least you get the force of the stroke on this, and you need to I feel this is just not something I'm going to start encouraging people to notate. There are two types of col legno. There's col legno battuto, so beating the string, you know, tapping the string, and then there is col legno tratto, which is to bow, to actually bow with the back of the bow, the sliding. So I just really recommend you say col legno battuto, or you can just say col legno bat, B-A-T-T period. Okay, and then that, you know, then the player is going to be bouncing along down there. I would say mark this mezzo forte, right? Just to get some more click out of it, and then it will really help with the whole kind of clockwork sound that you've got going on in here. I would say this is kind of on a joking little point. Be careful not to put in little rolls on the snare drum along with the glockenspiel and all the ticking and stuff, because then it sounds like a cash register from from a century ago, like between I guess the 1920s forwards to the I don't know, till today, if some people are still using the old style cash registers that would go ding, you know, that kind of thing. Also, maybe a little bit like a typewriter. So yeah, so I was just kidding around with that. You weren't going to put in snare drum, but there's a little bit of it here, right? And the dinging, so you know, maybe. Anyways, but you know, it still works fine. It isn't so much a part of the sound picture that is really a danger, but I was just kidding. So you know, right in here, like once again we see the important role of the oboe here. You know, just really taking us to the next level melodically. It's, you know, just really great. I love the way that you have the oboe really connect everything, and you know, it's so nice. And then English horn enclosing the harmony in the clarinets. That all works really great, beautifully balanced. All right. And then this pushes into the sound picture, and then you come in with, you know, this is like continuing onwards. We haven't got to the Ravel section yet, the Ravel kind of chords yet. Yeah, I love this, like the little tremolo here, which kind of you know, becomes part of the push here in the French horns. Yeah, and then it's just sort of surging back and forth. That's very cool. Then da 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 da. It's just, yeah, very cool. a trumpet. Which trumpet? If there's like a one in there, I can't see it. So yeah, so I'm assuming that I'll just assume that this is first trumpet. Okay, so first trumpet, the horns pushing into the roll of where the clarinets were, and then of course like taking an octave up here. Yeah. Yeah. So forte, oboe, piano, trumpet. The trumpet is still going to start to outplay the oboe by around here. Yeah, and then there's also a danger that the overtones of the trumpet by the time it gets to here will start to mess with the flute. But you are actually, as I recall, you're not pushing your trumpet all that. Yes, you're just kind of going up to mezzo forte here. So I mean, it's not enormously loud, but it's still, it still is adding a bit. I mean, I almost wish that you wouldn't go crescendo here, right? Because like nobody else is really going crescendo except for like timpani and so on. There isn't an overall push. It would be nice if you sort of held off on it till maybe around here, where bum bum bum, like it just naturally you'll get more force, right? Right, now this is great, but it's too short. Okay, it sounds good in the mock-up, but it's not going to sound great in real life. Add an octave or drop an octave, right? Or make it 4 octaves instead of 2. I think you need more. You need more sweep here. Now, I really love the way that this is scored right in here. You've got unison violins, right? So it's not even octave violins. It's just unison violins up there on that top note. And their partner in crime is just the first oboe once again, right? With occasional unisons from the second oboe, but not markedly so. And then like the horns and the rest of your reeds here are combining together with a little bit of help from a duet trumpets, all right, on the octave below, and you get a really big rich sound out of this. It's really really great. And you know what's the best about that is that you don't interfere with your kind of the continuing octaves right in here, and like the little tambourine stuff happening in here, timpani helping out, and bass trombone right in here. Yeah, so and then trombones coming in later. So this is really nicely scored. I really like the proportions in here. Like you're not throwing in everything, including the kitchen sink, before the big splash here. All right. Now, speaking of splashes, roll here, snare drum, yeah, and one hit on the bass drum here. Yeah, yeah, and then a big tish here. I mean, this. I mean, I could see how these rolls could be distributed amongst 3 players. If you have your cymbal player could hit this and then like start shaking the tambourine with the other hand and then hit this again. So it's not impossible by any means for 3 percussionists to be playing this. You might even have the bass drum player just like with the tambourine in one hand and then just go thump right here with the other hand. So it's doable, but the snare drum player couldn't be playing a roll here and the tambourine at the same time. So yeah, that's fine. I told you to only use 3 percussionists, but like even though you have 4 parts here, it's still doable. I see stuff like this in concert, in crossover concerts all the time, especially like education things, where you're just kind of showing kids and families things about the orchestra that are really fun to watch, fun to listen to. So oftentimes you'll have percussionists, doing separate things with separate hands. Yeah, especially like if you have less players available, right? You might only have 1 or 2 percussionists available because it's a smaller ensemble. Okay, so here we're getting into bum 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 bum. All right, so why are we going da 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 da? So this is like, yeah. So F double sharp, right? F natural, D sharp. So all right, so what does Barvinsky have in his own score? Okay, F double sharp, E sharp, D sharp, right? So you got to keep this diatonic. If you want, this is actually not in the score. You might have, this might be a mess up, I'm thinking. Like this was originally supposed to be a tie, right? A tie from G double sharp to G double sharp, and then the note here, which is E sharp, right? In the strings, right? Which you know, not to get into all the transposition stuff and so on, but yeah, yeah. So for your trumpets, this will be F double sharp. Okay, so keep it consistent. So if you must do this, score this as F double sharp and score this as E sharp. But you might want to go, like, since you're in a flat instrument here, you might want to go with enharmonic equivalence here throughout this whole passage, right? So you could even do that right down to the key signature, right? It probably would just be easier to read for everybody if you're going to go with B flat. But this is like really more of a C. To me, I feel that this is more of a C trumpet kind of a thing. Just kind of that brighter kind of a sound. But yeah, just score it on B flat, but just get the right enharmonic diatonic motion, I should say, rather than enharmonic pitches. Okay, so so let's break down the functions. All right, and I think it's just texture, balance, and function, right? And I think it's just easier. Now you got a lot of different pitches around the same area. C sharp, B sharp, A sharp, and some of this stuff can just be done on the fly by the player, by your timpanist. But then writing this low D sharp down here, really, really simple. And then this right here might just be a quick retuning up to E. Because, the player's only going to have one kettle that can reach down this far, right? So just be aware that there might be just a touch of glissando in there. Yeah, because you're kind of not really giving them any choice. They might end up, like if they really wanted to get this right, they might end up playing with 5 kettles, like an extra big kettle down there. All right. Okay. Yeah, and then, bass trombone, tuba, double bass, contrabassoon, and so on. Yeah. Still throws me when I look down here and say this A sharp is like, no, that's out of range. Yes, it's in range, Thomas. Yeah. So that's all pretty solid. I like the way that the timpani kind of work together, the snare drum, the cymbals, and the tambourine, and so on. I think it's just, yeah. Once again, really works great. And yeah, I mean, it's really kind of looking as if the tambourine player is meant to trade off to bass drum. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now the melody, what everybody's interested in. So here you've got your 3 trumpets and so on, sort of arrayed to kind of take these different functions. So see what you're doing here? I prefer this to this 1, 2 on top and 3 on the bottom. I prefer to just score an octave in second voice and a single note in first voice if you're going to do this kind of a layout, right? So I would say just rescore this If you're going to try to get this performed, just redo it like that, and it's just way clearer. All right, so melody and trumpets here, and then here you've got Divisian 3. You know something? You don't need to go Divisian 3 here. The trumpets are going to be loud enough. They don't need any help on this. You just leave that out. All right, leave out these middle pitches. All right, the trumpet has got them. They're playing them. There's absolutely nothing that like further dividing your strings here, further dividing your violins here is going to do for for themselves by trying to grab this note here. All right, so you got these octaves, and I have to say that like it really is a fairly lowly placed, low placed melody, just because the right hand of the pianist is limited in how many notes it could play, doesn't mean that you have to limit the strings and how broad they can play, right? Like here, you're throwing in these repeated notes above. Well, why can't the melody play higher, right? Why can't the first violins be placed an octave higher? Just leave the trumpets where they are. Their overtones will feed into the strings above, right? And then here you could just continue that octave, go all the way up to the high C sharp 7. So just keep this as an octave, going all the way up to that skyscraping C sharp way up high. Then ba 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 bum bum bum. So yeah, so you don't have to just really you don't have to limit yourself to the pitches that were indicated in the score, is what I'm telling you. Right, and then here like the horns come in, playing like the lower part along with A2 oboes, A2 oboes. So I think right in here you should add, like if you're going to leave everything the way it is, add flutes along to this, just like at least for this bar and a half, just to give it more weight on top because of the horns on the bottom just being so strong. But you having said that, like you could even have bulked up your horns a little bit more, but with 3 or even 4 horns playing the same line. Yeah, I think, but you want those other horns for other things. That's all right. I mean, for that matter, there could have been some trombone helping out with that too. But no need to get too excited. If there were any critique that I would say about this kind of in general, is that the melody is just a little weak compared to the accompaniment, right? So that's one of the, that would be one thing that you could improve by jumping up the violins here, by bulking up the horns a little bit and the at least for this passage right here, this part of the passage, adding some flutes on this high note and so on. So maybe strengthen that up a bit. Okay, but like. I really love that you spent so much time working on things like repeated intervals, the kind of arcing that is going on with these parts. Just because there are gaps in the there are rests that are put in there to make the piano part play clearly, doesn't mean that when you transcribe it to orchestra, you can fill in the gaps with the next likely chord if there were no gap, right? Or the next likely interval. And just because the pianist or the piano part leaves out some possible intervals that could be played doesn't mean that you have to, right? You could be filling in some of these things, right? Now, I mean, having said that, there's a certain charm to those little gaps as well. Just at least the way that you scored them. I'm not seeing this in every arrangement, but I think with things like this, where you added a little bit of oomph here, harmonically in certain places, then I think that like the gap is not so critical. But I still think that you could fill them in. Yeah. But I mean, nice stack here, clarinets and second violins with flutes on top. That's really fun. And then going to the same thing with oboes on top, right? kind of trading back and forth. And what I really love about it the most is how you just swap the functions back and forth without really losing any force, right? Like going from this higher thing, the lower, the trombones can easily kind of fend for themselves, playing along with everything playing along with the lower or sort of middle strings right in here. Yeah. All right. Yeah, the three trumpets working together. Divisi, like, do the second violins really need to be playing the lowest note here? Couldn't they just leave it out? Right, because it's already loud enough in the trumpets and in the other instruments. Yeah, I don't think you need this lowest note. I think you just leave it at divisi in 2. I think, yeah, just stick with that. Because the more you divide this up, the less, like in a fortissimo passage, the less power your strings have. And it's the kind of thing where, like, any scoring from, like, say, soft, like just generic pianissimo, whatever, all the way up to, say, around mezzo forte, I don't worry so much about divisi. But then, getting mezzo forte and higher, I just really like to watch out how much I divide up my voices, how much fewer players have to balance with louder scoring. Okay, just watch out for that. Yeah, and then with the switching to different instruments for the melody and so on, and it also works with a kind of trade-off between the functions, interpreting the accompaniment parts. Just really, really nice. I just, you keep it from sounding like it is going on too much the same way. So, like, if you pair that, that really great idea of going back and forth and, adding xylophone in here, right? Now, we're at a point where absolutely you would have to have 4 percussionists. There's no way you could get away with 3 here. Like, if the station, the snare drum station, had the cymbal right next to it, then you could be going back and forth between those 2 instruments, I guess. Anyway, but yeah, if you were to add a faster tempo here, just more furious, then I think that everything would just, like, it would sound less tick-tocky and it would just be more frantic, right? Because it is this piece was written by an 18-year-old, or for all we know, he might have started working on it when he was 15, right? So it has that real kind of fresh sound to it, and yet wisdom beyond his years. He seems to me like he is opening a door for us to a particular landscape and a time and a set of emotions and a sensibility, right? So I feel that, like, that this is meant to just be hell on wheels, all right? So, like, the slower it goes, the more that your precision becomes something that becomes too much about timekeeping. I apologize, it sounds too pejorative or too critical. But I just feel like the kind of the tick-tock back and forth kind of a thing just becomes really pronounced, especially when you're adding elements like xylophone and so on. But when it's going fast, and it's just kind of more furious, then I think that becomes, like, not a problem, right? It solves the problem immediately. Yeah, and this is cool right in here. You could have actually scored these like tenuto, right? Or tenuto staccato, getting ready for a nice long. Or you could have scored them all as accents. Or you could have scored them marcato. You could have changed the articulation style here, right? Rather than just continuing on with the same short note kind of thing. And now, finally, back to the beginning. I really love how this is all scored. I mean, yes, I've got a little evaluation criterion, which is, asks whether or not the treatment of the melody represents an emotional and timbral progression. And here, yes, you do it, but you do it really subtly, right? It's not, you don't have really obvious contrasts of texture and so on and so forth. But I would argue that this score really does have some great timbral progressions and great emotional progressions, and it just is, it really depends on the ability of the player to realize it, right? So this is just so gorgeous right in here. The clarinet above the oboe above the clarinets here, and it really is a beautiful solo sound. I would even mark this solo just to really make sure that it came through right. Now here, like your sound set is kind of incapable of really expressing a true pianissimo, like it, not the easiest thing in the world to play pianissimo in this low E, and but it's still a great pro oboist should have no problem. So just to really have, to just really drop down to pianissimo here and then come back at piano here. I think that, like, if this were more pronounced, this were really, just really obviously a drop of strength, unlike what we hear in the mock-up. And then kind of coming back stronger, the bass clarinet right in there, beautifully adding those little bits of harmony and then joining in with the clarinets. And then, the push from piano to mezzo forte and then back down to triple P, right? This is really lovely because you are submerging the oboe line right in here as these instruments play, da 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 da, right? I would really avoid this though, slurring over the repeated note, right? It's you lose the definition of the ta ta. Do you know what I mean? Like right here, you're asking ta ta, we're not getting ta 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 or ta 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 ta. I would say leave the slur out, or maybe just slur from the last two notes or something. But don't smother the precision of your dotted rhythm in here. Now it's different. Like this slur is different because these are notes. These are notes walking down in sequential order, or they're just walking. They're not the same note. So we get the rhythm right in here. So what is the plan here? It seems like you might be missing some slurs, right? If you're going to do this here, you probably intend for this to be slurred and for this to be slurred. All right, so it's a little inconsistent. Or maybe this was an accident. I don't know. All right, but so far, everything's nicely scored. You don't need the piano here if you've got it here. All right. I love the way the bassoons come in here. This is nice. This is also a subtle one, but it still is a progression of the timbre. And then right in here, there's even more emotion. I really love the way you keep the French horns really in the background. You don't let them get too big right in here. I would almost prefer this to be the first player right in here, because they are going to be matching this down to a really fine point. And it's not that the other players couldn't do that, but they're going to be this first player is going to be sitting closest to the rest of the winds in most seating order, right? Towards the left, you'll see the horns kind of in a little bit of a row, and then there might be a bit of a gap, and then after that, like the trumpets and so on, and the row continues on where trombones, tuba. But you'll see the trombones off to the left in their own little group, and then you'll see the horns off to the left in their own little group, and the first horn player will be sitting closer to, they'll just have that just 1 degree more intimacy to the rest of the winds. And also, it's just the finest, most delicate playing that you're asking here. So those are both arguments of giving it to the first. But yeah, just really nice matching with the bassoon. And I have to say, this is like one of the most beautiful ways of ending on this E in any of these entries that I've seen, including mine. I think it is incredibly eloquent, the way that this all comes to a close for this prologue. Nicely done, Thomas. All right, so now jumping ahead here. This has got an interesting it's got an interesting organization of materials. And I'm going to tell you to not change it, but I'm going to also point out that it does create a slight problem in terms of interpreting the impressionistic harmony that Barvinsky has. Right. So far you've avoided that problem, but here you kind of step into it, and the reason why is because you have oboe and first violin playing in a double octave with the first horn way below. Okay, so that's all beautiful, that's gorgeous, and everything else. But by putting the horn below the harmony here, do you see what happens? Like when the melody was above the harmony and not below it, then it's really easy to identify all of these as six chords rather than 6/3 minor chords, right? So this right here is a D major six chord. The B is the sixth of the D major chord, right? So that's, and then and it just sort of moves around in that configuration, and it kind of seems to float, right? Whereas like there's kind of no root to it. Instead of a root, we kind of have this we have this pedal D happening below, right? But then you're slightly further at risk because you don't have any kind of sustain imitation of the sustain pedal here. So it really just is all about the pizzicato in the context of that continuing onwards, right? All right, but like when you put this below here, then this turns into a B minor triad, right? And then here this turns into sounding E. This is an E minor triad, right? And you can kind of hear it in the music. Not so much because, like, especially if people have been listening to a lot of these evaluations, they will start to kind of hear, the ear will just sort of fill in. It's like, oh yeah, but imagine somebody had never heard anything, any Barvinsky, except for your orchestration of it, right? With the D not so strong, this might just feel like B minor going to E minor, right? So that is the risk. But even having said that, I'm going to tell you not to change it because it's just really beautifully done. But it's less impressionist than it could have been. I love the idea of the pizzicato, right? And this sort of leads forwards into more of that really nicely delineated accompaniment style. And I really love the way that the horns come in here. Yeah, really nicely done. I like the way that the strings have nice, clear up and down bowing patterns. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, and so on. Right? It's like and this would be two ups. So it's just really giving the players plenty of bow space on each note. That just really stronger. It results in stronger, clearer playing in that. Yeah, and this, and then when you come back to arco here, this is nicely done. These probably could be longer bows. You probably do half bow and so on. But like I like the way that you got this scored along with the bassoon and just the context of everything else. So and the pizzicato before. So I would say don't mess with it. I think I think this is intended to be starting at the C, right? So that suits me fine. And then here da 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 da. Right, yeah. So what I think is the real kicker here is the trombone. And okay, so I have kind of discouraged using the trombone in this way too much, right? But I think just as this one, like you do it twice, you have this, and then you have the horns working with the first horn working with the first bassoon here. Yeah. See, I would almost, I know this would make things look really horrible, but I would be tempted to have this just as a single note in second voice for your second player. Yeah. And I would prefer that this were also like rather than playing on the downbeat, it played like it supported this A right in here. But I don't know. Let's leave it as it is. It's fine. Right. But yeah, beautiful. Like this is kind of more Barvinsky's bittersweet kind of. It's pathos, right? It really has a lot of it. Yeah, he just really deep emotional thinker in his scoring, isn't he? His piano and like his what survives of his orchestral work is also just really gorgeous. Yeah, so I like the contrast between trombone, horns working with bassoons, second bassoon working with the cellos, and then coming back with trombone. That's just really lovely. Trombone and bassoon in this case. But yeah, the bassoon just has this, excuse me, the trombone has this really wonderful quality with the way that you've scored it. So I'd say don't mess with it. Don't expect like a spooky, surrealistic smoothness with this. They will play it legato. Um, but it's of course like a trombone legato is not really, it's a bunch of sneaking certain pitches and positions together, and then of course like slurring others beautifully when they're in the same when they're in the same spectrum, the same harmonic spectrum. Yeah, but it just, yeah, beautiful use of trombone there, and the rest of the scoring is fine, like no problems that I can see. Yeah, and then the cello's coming back in for this, and then tremolo down to triple P. That's really, really lovely. Okay, now this I sort of have a bit of a conceptual problem with because, like, I feel that Barvinsky's wandering lines shouldn't be curtailed. They shouldn't be cut off at the nose with like this sort of is, right? So the melody line or the wandering line is just rising here, and then here it drops an octave, right, rather than continuing up. Now there's absolutely no reason why the bass clarinet could not trade off to the first clarinet here on a higher D and just take the entire clarinet part up an octave, except for this note. Don't take that up an octave, but take everything else up an octave. The clarinet has absolutely no problem playing mezzo forte on high E, high F sharp, and so on. It would actually sound really beautiful, I think. But I think don't mess with the integrity of the line. If you are listening to this part and you're saying, "Oh, but the clarinet is just so beautiful in here. I'd really rather have this be the apex, not an octave higher." I don't want the really high, squeaky Chalumeau stuff. I want the kind of lower, richer Chalumeau stuff, and then the throat tones, upper, excuse me, clarino. Did I say Chalumeau? You might be saying that you don't want the higher clarino register, squeaky clarino register stuff, but you want like the lower clarino throat tones, and then upper Chalumeau kind of stuff. All right, great, fine. You want that? Then like basically, what if you were to maybe bring in your contrabassoon, right? I'm just reminding myself you've got a contrabassoon. Okay, so yeah, I mean I looked at it and commented on it just a few minutes ago, but you have to forgive me because everything is just starting to just I've evaluated so many scores in the past couple of weeks that they're all starting to slosh together. Anything that isn't in front of my face at that moment, has a tendency to just kind of float away. All right, so bring in your contrabassoon, have it slur up, and then have your bass clarinet slur in right around here, and then just continue onwards at that lower octave up into the clarinet. That's what I would recommend because I just feel that the drop here, that it just really interrupts the integrity of the line, or just leave it the way it is, but then jump up the clarinet like I was suggesting. So either drop this stuff down using the bass clarinet to get the first couple of lower notes, or yank up the clarinet would be my preference. But of course, like if you hear what you hear here, and if you hear what you hear here, if you really really like what you are hearing in your mind and hearing in the mock-up, and you just want to really keep that, then that's fine with me. But there's nothing about it that doesn't work orchestrally. But I just feel that there's something about the flow there that is a little awkward right here. Okay. And I would also mark these parts solo. Here you have solo rubato. Now, just kind of reaching out to a lot of my players, a lot of my orchestrators out there who have been assigning up arrow glissandos. Just look at up arrow roll marks. Just look at how clean these look, right? Without the arrow at the top, right? It means exactly what an up arrow roll means, but it doesn't have that awkward arrow at the top, right? So just leave it out unless you have a downward roll to contrast it with, right? Which is almost never. So solo rubato. Almost feel like it should say solo here and rubato in. I mean, you're already saying a tempo rubato, right? So I don't think you need to mention that here. The harpist will remember. Okay, so and then this is really lovely. And here you preserve the integrity of the line, right? And it just really sounds fantastic. And then just ending with this roll. And I love how the roll of the harp provides the harmony over which the harp is going to play its little solo. This probably should be scored in the left-hand staff, right? So you have this big roll, and then this sort of trades off to the other part. I almost would be tempted. See, like I think that this E here could be given to the left hand, and then this could be covered by the right hand, and then right in here, this could be in the left-hand staff, right? Just as a separate part. Just put in a treble clef right in here, and then make this into two separate lines. Then then the roll as well. Yeah, and this is lovely the way the cellos come in. Yeah, there's a lot of instruments on this wandering line, but it still works great. So, all right, so now we get into one of my favorite parts right in here, at least in your score. So yeah, so flute on top. It's really lovely. Doubled by first violins. I don't think you need this overlapping here. I think you can just end on an eighth note. Or, since you have, like right here, like this sort of just stops, right? Yeah, I mean, I just think that maybe you don't even need this bar at all to sort of complete this. I don't know. Maybe this could just be in, this could be scored in first violin and solve the problem completely. All right. So, yeah, so this pizzicato jumping around here, that's all cool. Yeah. Blop, 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 blop. Yeah, see, it's just really, really easy for the cellist because this is an open string, right? So they just have to finger this one, and then this one above it. Excuse me. They just have to finger these two pitches above the open string down here. Sorry, just as I was saying that, my nose started to twitch because it wanted to sneeze, but I didn't allow it to. And then right in here, this G can be played as an open string. And so all that's needed is just to finger this one down here on the E string and just cross over, leaving out the D string in the middle and the A string. Yeah, so that all works great. Nicely scored. And then you've got you've got octave melody, flute, and bassoon right in here. That just really works great. Especially with a little bit of cushioning from your first violins there, and then the violas in the middle, it just works fine. A little bit of snare drum in here, just as long as it's not too loud. Like, here you're saying pianissimo, and I think that's really, really important. And then you don't push at the dynamics here until you've got more going on. Timpani, and the this changing to definite string octaves, right? Oboe coming in that's a little bit more firm in that middle register as things start to heat up, and of course horn doubling the second violin. Yeah, da da, and yeah, trombones doing their thing, right? I think that this all works really great, and I really love the diminuendo here, but you forgot to put in rallentando. I would say rallentando rather than ritardando here. And then, this could be longer, but I actually like the way that it rolls from a slower tempo back to a tempo. Should be marked here. And you could even go slightly faster from right here, right? So just like a little bit of rallentando and then just gaining some speed. Further accelerando, even faster than this. Further accelerando here. And, I wouldn't put two slightly fasters in a row. I would, maybe even faster, right? Would be a better way of putting this. Yeah, so anyways, yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say about this score. It's a pretty cool, pretty cool piece of workmanship. Thomas. It's just it is a really nice entry, and it really fits in well with a lot of entries that are around it. Yeah, it sort of makes me wonder, like, how would you interpret the next three challenges? What would your choice be? There will be like this wide variety of choices for our 10th anniversary, focused around the work of a single composer. And there will be like this beautiful undiscovered gem. Very few people who love the composer who will be orchestrating know about this one piece. Probably some do, but it's just not what you usually think of when you think of that composer. And then next year's challenge will be a piece that might seem a little out of left field, maybe for it might be the kind of thing that some people would be expecting that I would have done all along, but in the context of the choices that I've made over the past 7 years, may be unexpected. Okay, so I will say no more about that, except for just to wonder how you would handle those things. I think they really, phenomenally well. Like just seeing your development as an orchestrator here, and your gifts and talents and everything else. It just this is another one. I just would wonder. I would really love to hear performed, and think would be really a great addition to the repertoire. So with that encouragement, I will say just thank you so much for helping me help the musicians of Ukraine. In more than just the appeal that I had, but also in your kind of talking back to Barvinsky from across the years with your let's face it, we're all doing homages to his music with these orchestrations, and and for supporting the channel and just being an awesome guy, and that goes out to all my other patrons who are helping out this year and who've chipped in, and to my website subscribers and my regular viewers. Thanks, guys, for keeping up the views, keeping up the comments. And speaking of comments, I'm sure people have got a lot to say, so please pitch in below. And with that, I will leave you for now, and I'll be back really soon with more very, very cool scores from our Patreon supporters.